welcome to MSD at Home series. Thank you for joining us. My name is George Stojanovic. I am a senior lecturer in architectural design. I've joined the faculty last year and formerly was an associate professor in architecture at the University of Belgrade. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Now, my pleasure is to introduce Lacol, architectural practice from Sants neighborhood of Barcelona, represented by their co-founder, Cristina Gamboa Masdevall. Lacol is a group of architects. It's a young and emerging practice, best known for their recently built project for LaBorda Housing Cooperative. Their work has been awarded and internationally recognized. They're invited to present at Venice Biennale in 2021. Now, as a spoiler alert, I'd like to say that central to Lacol's practice is user engagement in the design process, and this is normally conducted through series of workshops and interviews. And I dare to say that Lacol transcends standard architectural practice and shows how design innovation is linked to finance and provision on one side, and the use of buildings and their management on the other. This is why they're able to engage efficiently with social, economic, and environmental issues in their approach. In Australia, housing is a pressing issue. I know that myself, first thing I discovered about Melbourne is a lack of affordable and quality housing solutions. This is because of the increasing population. And here at MSD, we are dealing with the topic across several levels in both teaching and research. When I first got in touch to discuss the topic with Cristina, and we thought that lecture will be part of Studio Epsilon lectures, undergraduate capstone subject, which I'm coordinating. But since then, we've decided with encouragement from Ellen and Donald that the lecture should be open to a wider audience, and questions will remain open as we speak. We'll take questions in the end, and we hope to hear from Studio Epsilon students as well as from Studio B students and students of graduate studios which are embarked on Future Homes competition organized by IBA Melbourne, as well as researchers working under the umbrella of Hallmark Research Initiative Affordable Housing. I think this is enough from me. Without further ado, I'll let Cristina speak.
Thank you very much, George, for the introduction. I wish to thank the school, everyone to inviting us. So I will share my screen to start. So, as also George has said in the introduction, I will talk about the cooperative housing experience in Barcelona, and we consider housing as a kind of cross-sectional issue in our life, and also as a response to the current challenges of in terms of social and even environmental. So we understood the housing as infrastructure for sustainable living in the broadest way possible, from economy to sustainability, social and political, as said. So, and how like the everydayness, so the daily practices can be really radical, providing kind of a new set of protocols, a new way of relate each others. So the lecture is going to be organized in 5 blocks. Briefly, I will talk about the introduction to Lacol and our relation with the territory, because I think it's also interesting to understand how this project began, and these networks are really important. The introduction to the cooperative housing model, which we are promoting, and also in the context of Barcelona, which probably can have some similarities with the context here there in Melbourne. The experience of LaBorda, as also George said, the first collective housing project that we have done, and where also we understand a close relation from the development process to the architectural definition. Some reflections, some thoughts of LaBorda since the people is living there, and also taking in consideration that we have had the confinement, so the lockdown, and how it has been experienced there. And the last, it will be kind of the replicability, how this experience has been repeated, and how also the municipality has introduced this in the housing plan and is spreading as a model. So in that sense, Lacol, we started more than 10 years ago, also as a students, kind of rented a space to share infrastructure, to share the printer, and also the hours in the university. And from the neighborhood, we learned the cooperative form. So basically, it's an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled structure. And it was interesting as we, in a way, we were functioning, we were established as a collective, as an association, when we were projecting ourselves in the future as a practice, had the sense to do it in a collective form. And we were established in the neighborhood of Sands, which Sands is one of the neighborhoods in the outskirts of the city, outside the old city of Barcelona, and it was an industrial area. So, and because of this industrial activity, the workers' association were really strong. So since last century, Sands had a strong association, social movement and association network, which came also from the syndicalisms, from more autonomous movement, anarchist movement. And in that moment, in the last century, it was this idea of a cooperative neighborhood. A cooperative neighborhood was based on the idea that through collective structures, we can provide to workers, to popular, and to the society all the main needs. So also during our period as students, when we had to define the final project, which kind of it was kind of I don't know the name in English, but basically it's kind of the last exercise of the studies. Three of the members of Lacol choose one real place in Sands. And Camballo, which is in the image, it was the last industrial premises to be transformed, to be converted in Barcelona. It was a huge area, 1/4 of the neighborhood, totally empty. And it was at the same time 2007, 2008, 2009, so in the middle of the economical crisis. And it was basically the opportunity from the academia to start relating us in the neighborhood where we established. And it was the space that as architects later allow us to learn the way that we understood the role of the architect, part of a huge movement in a total horizontal way. And in 2009, we got involved in a platform to claim for the use of these premises, to set collective uses, and to, in a way, introduce the life of the neighborhood in these empty blocks. And that was in the 11th of June of 2011. So just after a month after the May 2011, where the squares were occupied, like the Occupy movement, when the society said we are really tired of the economical crisis, of the political management. In Barcelona, it was a huge power of the society. So in a way, it was the combination of this popular power with this platform that was claiming the space for more than 30 years in that moment. So that we, as part of the neighborhood, start transforming the different blocks. So Camballo basically it's a paradigmatic experience of bottom-up city transformation, where the people with their hands, the materials around, the skills, self-built, public, in a way, like communitary facilities, and start inhabiting these spaces with cultural activities, with like a library and a kind of a cafe and meeting point at the beginning. So this Camballo was for us a kind of a starting point to understand how we can relate our practice with people, with participation. And Camballo started to be transformed in 2011. And here with all the people using the spaces. And we can see here all Camballo. And from this first space, the block 11, the 11 block, so the activities were continuing inside the different blocks with agreement of the municipality, also outside with the different kind of public spaces. But in a certain moment, we realized that we had so many people involved in Camballo. We had the skills from people who had been involved in different kind of, from carpentry to steel, etc., and also as architects. So it was a kind of a combination of knowledge that was made easy to start thinking how to scale up these kind of initiatives. And in that moment, thinking how Camballo could become a kind of a real piece of the city and need the complexity of users. And in 2012, 1 year later of the entrance, as an assembly of Camballo, we started to think how we can provide economical activities, how we can provide housing, because also we were in the middle of this crisis where housing was one of the main points. So from the assembly, different groups of people started to think kind of projects. One of them, it was an incubator of social economy. So how we can introduce new activities, like productive activities, again, in these industrial premises. And one of the other groups, which finally became LaBorda, was starting to think how we can develop an autonomous, bottom-up and self-managed way to provide neighbors with decent and stable housing. And that's why we start looking for reference to international references of cooperative housing. So in this context, I think it's important to understand what is happening in Barcelona. So since the dictatorship in Spain, the main housing form, the housing tenancy that was promoted was the ownership. It was also a way to control the society, to make it them less conservative, and also to promote the economy related to the construction. That's why many years ago, where we are now, Barcelona is the city that has the highest percentage of rent, but it's in any way also really low. So Barcelona has the 65% of ownership and the 35% of like other kind of tenancies, especially the rent. But the main point is that only the 2% of the housing stock is public. So that means that the private market has the total control, and that's why there is no mechanisms to control the prices. So before, in 2011, before like the crisis, the prices started to grow, to increase extremely, and just 2 years ago we were again in another bubble. So the municipality was trying to introduce different mechanisms to control the market through increasing the number of public housing, but also to increasing the number of housing units that could be like blocked from the speculation. And something also that is important, it's also in Spain, the price of the energy was also increasing because the energy companies were also totally private. So again, we had no mechanisms to control the price of the energy. So in a way, this kind of combination make that also realize us that the housing is totally related to the right of the city, where you can live, where you have stability, where you can in a way get part of a different networks of solidarity and support, but also how the instability, the inaffordability can produce problems of health. So how, in a way, and also how the price of the energy can produce energy poverty. All this kind of cocktail is something that is really present in our understanding of housing and how we deal with the architectural definition in trying to solve these different issues from the model to the architecture. And in that sense, what we understood as a cooperative housing basically is a model that we saw in these preliminary studies from Uruguay, for example, or even in Denmark. We also know that it's present in Canada, in the States, in other South American countries, Germany, also probably in Australia. So in a way, it's a model which is not really known, but it's present in different countries all over the world. And our framework was defined by basically, which is a non-speculative model, which has to help to define this blocked housing stock, which is kind of cannot be bombing by the real estate market and cannot increase the monthly cost. So it's collective own, and this is the mechanism that it's also to lock the speculation. Because it's a non-profit model, so it's affordable monthly quotes, because you cannot have to produce benefit itself. Basically, this model wants to solve the cost of the construction, the cost of the maintenance, and to produce also kind of a solidarity box, but that's all. And basically the cooperative, it's the owner of the building, and the cooperative establish a contract of right of use to the individuals who are going to live in each of the units, in each of the housing. And you are able to live in the cooperative for your entire life. You pay an affordable monthly quote, but you are not able, because you are not the owner, you are only kind of a user of the flat. You are not able to speculate or to sell it or rent it to others. So basically, this is the main characteristic. This is the mechanism. So, and to start this kind of model in Barcelona, where there is a lack of land because it's a really dense city, we started conversations with the municipality. So this is the webpage of the municipality, where they also had introduced this kind of experiences in the current housing plan, and the first project, LaBorda, was able, because the municipality made a leasehold of the land to the cooperative, where the cooperative built the building. And this is a kind of exchange that make this model a kind of cooperation between the public and the cooperative movement, which in our way it's interesting because introduce new ways of management, but also a relation with the public sector, make it more affordable and make it that is a kind of a new model of public housing. So when LaBorda was already ongoing under definition and construction, the municipality developed the housing plan, which was called the Right to Housing Plan from the 2016 to 2025, where to increase the public housing, it was interesting to mobilize private stock and kind of new agents, but also it was interesting that they understood how some of the challenges that we are going to face, such for example, the aging population in Spain. We have a high rate of elderly people. So they, in a way, understood how this kind of cooperative projects based on the community are also able to provide kind of care support and solve some of the future issues. And in a way to increase the number of affordable flats, that's the way to introduce this kind of agreements between cooperative movement and the municipalities. Also to, in a way, diversify the mechanisms to provision of social housing. And in one of the main lines, this idea of boosting the social market, understand how it's a kind of a process itself. And it was important to understood the construction and the provision of housing apart from the real estate, apart from the capitalism mechanisms. So understanding the person, the people in the center, the care and the social economy as the pillars of that model. So with this kind of introduction, I'm going to talk about this process of understanding from the development to the architecture. So this is the main assembly of LaBorda, who, as I said, this group of neighbors came from Camballo, from the neighborhood of Sants, with a shared need of decent and affordable housing. So, and in that point, I think it's interesting also to mention, these are the Turner's laws of housing, which were some of the conclusions that Turner learned from their studies in Latin America, from the self-managed and informal housing settlements. And I really like this, the two, where said the important thing about a house is what it does in the life of the dwellers rather than what it physically is. And this is important because in a way, the capacity or the way that the housing can provide, as I said, stability, care, support, control, I think it's essential. And how the architecture can also help in that, so to fulfill this kind of goals, it's really important. So it's important to understand that since the process of LaBorda started, as I said, in 2012, in the context of Camballo, with this idea to look to approach new models. And finally, the people moved to LaBorda by the end of 2018. So basically, next December, it's going to be the second anniversary. So people, it's living for a year and a half nowadays. And it's important to understand in that diagram, this relation between the organizational development, how from a bottom-up model had to be professionalized. So more and more complex and with technical teams which gave support. Also, it was a process of legal and financial development, and in parallel, the architectural development, which in a way, here we had like the milestones of the workshops and the participatory moments. So during the whole process, we said that we made housing to make community, and the process of developing the architecture also make the opportunity to establish debates, discussions, to understand more the needs of the community and to define the model of conviviality. At the same time, because we had a really low budget and also kind of a calendar and different goals, all these kind of issues related to our practice was totally shared and decided collectively with future inhabitants. We were part of this assembly. So the decisions were made by consensus in these different workshops. And I think it's interesting to understand this management scheme. So basically, it was a general assembly which met even to nowadays, is there is one assembly one Saturday per month, so it's monthly meeting, and then a series of working groups, committees, which was architecture, administration, economy, legal, communication, and shared living or conviviality. These are groups with 7-8 people from the General Assembly, so no professionals, no architects in the architectural committee, where this is the mechanism to kind of the link between the technical teams where Lacol was hired and the General Assembly. So we share all the process with the architectural committee, with the commission, and we decide collectively which issues, which topics, which discussions had to be decide in the General Assembly. So every month, every 2 months, when it was needed, we prepared these main workshops with the General Assembly where all the main decisions were taken. And nowadays, in the conviviality, this scheme is changing. So new commissions as maintenance or kitchen. So in a way, new groups are formed, and this architectural committee, for example, has disappeared in its form. And it was also interesting to understand that it was a new model. It was a collective ownership, and the conventional bank was not interested, but even the cooperative wanted to challenge the conventional bank system. So LaBorda was looking for alternative funding from the social economy. And finally, the economical scheme is based that through initial down payment, each unit, so each family or unit of conviviality, pay 18,500 euros, which this became like the initial capital, the own funds of the cooperative, which is around the 20% of the investment. The 70% came from COP57, which is a cooperative of financial services. It's a cooperative, kind of a cooperative bank, which gave the kind of a stocks, titles, and a conventional loan. And then we also had participatory loans, which is a kind of crowdfunding. And finally, 8% came from public grants and non-refundable contributions. So, but we managed to have like the total budget, which is 2.8, almost 3 million, from alternative funding structures. And the monthly quotes, which it's almost half of the market price. It's as the medium size, 450 euros per month, which also includes one person hired as a coordinator, which also helps with the legal and economical issues, the cost of the energy from the common areas, and also a saving box in case that any unit need support, financial support. So this is kind of a really, really affordable price for the Barcelona market nowadays. So jumping to the architecture, so this is the plot in between these two buildings that it was owned by the municipality, and the municipality made this leasehold of the land for 75 years, and the cooperative pay around 3,000 euros per year as a kind of a renting of the land. That is also a way that the municipality is not losing land and is providing 28 units of public housing and affordable prices. So this was from the groundbreaking ceremony from the community and just starting the architecture. So this is the LaBorda. So this is LaBorda in this kind of position in the limit of Can Batlló, which is all this industrial area and the old neighborhood. And in a way, it was one of the entrance for us, it was understood as one of the entrance, because here we had a kind of a long street that ends in this in our building. So you will see later how also this idea of understanding the public and provide something more to the city. We made a passage to go through the building and to really enter to the public park. So the first phase of the project was interview to all the people who were in the assembly. So we made this kind of survey, this interview, to really know the profile of the people. And this was through asking about the family structure, the incomes, about the mobility dynamics, about also where they current housing access, also about the energy demand, energy consumptions, a lot of information that also allowed people to be really aware about where they were living, how they were living, the cost of living, and also about energy poverty. Some of them were in energy poverty without knowing it. So in a way, the process of definition, it's also a process of empowerment and acknowledge them. So here was a kind of this radiography of the group that basically we select some of the main outcomes. So in one hand, we had a really diverse composition of the group, which is also a mirror of the society. So this idea of the conventional family prototype with 2 adults or 2 kids, for example, is not more present at all in Barcelona or even in the group. So it was a lot of single people, which is also, we are more atomized. Sorry, like we are more like individualized as a society. There are more couples, mothers or fathers with kids, and also units of cohabitation, which mean different adults like living together. So that makes us to realize that we need a really flexible infrastructure and different typologies of housing. In the other hand, this idea of that almost 50% of the people in their previous houses were paying a lot, so it was kind of more than 50% of the incomes so through housing. So the idea of like to reduce the cost of the construction, to make more affordable the LaBorda, it was essential, and make it really passive to understand how we can reduce the energy consumption, because in their previous houses they were suffering energy poverty because they had to pay so much for the house that they had not they cannot assume like the heating system, for example. And the last was about the mobility. In Barcelona, we were kind of, it was compulsory to build parking, which we also were challenging this regulation. So this idea, like the different household composition, we are in LaBorda 49 adults and 13 children in different kind of agrupations. From 10 units are from 1 person, 8 from 2 person. We can see like only 1 unit, it's a kind of a conventional family of 4 people, like 2 adults and 2 kids. So in this idea of the diversity is really present. And one of the main goals of LaBorda was also to enhance the community living. So how we can, in a way, rethink the program of collective housing. In that sense, we understood that we cannot reduce the number of housings, the number of units, so we have to redefine what we can take out from the units and make it common. So finally, we had 2,018 square meters of community areas, which it's more or less like 10 square meters per unit. And basically, this came as a process of understanding which kind of social dynamics we were to make in common, and to understand how how that daily practices can be a radical tool for social transformation, taking into account, for example, gender issues, how a collective kitchen can promote an equal share of the household tasks, for example, or the kitchen tasks, and reflections and discussions like that were really present. So in a way, we start thinking which are the different kind of activities that we realize at home, which means a home more than a shelter, kind of a series of spaces to care the body, to just a storage, etc., etc. And as a community, which is our conviviality model, what we want to share, the energy supply, the mobility, the economy, healthcare. So in a way, each community is going to define their own model, And in the case of LaBorda, it was, of course, the energy supply. We have a collective heating system. The mobility, we decided to not have a car. We have only just bicycle parking. The economy, as I mentioned, it is totally collective, but what was kind of more new and also challenging for our way of living, it was also to understand how, in terms of the health and the care, we can share spaces. And because it's an intergenerational community, we have people from just some months until people already retired. So in a way, the care that we can provide in different moments of your life, it's really different, and also taking kind of a feminist perspective, understood the community as the provision, as the mechanism to provision care allows to challenge like the historical distribution of this kind of responsibilities. So in terms of the architecture, it was also important to understand how these different activities can be developed in different groups, from the individual in one of these spaces or in your own house to the neighborhood, and how LaBorda can be also understood as an infrastructure for the neighborhood in relation with the spaces of Can Batlló, but also providing new spaces for the surroundings. And also it was interesting, as we were defining all this program, it was interesting to understand how the management will function, but also which are the impacts of the spaces. And that is also because we understood LaBorda as also a response to the climate emergency, because through collective areas and collective infrastructures and services, there is a reduction of the consumption. So also there is, for us, it was a response to be more sustainable in terms of environmental aspects. So this idea to reduce the surface of construction, to collectivize infrastructure, to decide which are the needs, where are going to be developed through this participatory process. Finally, we managed to decide that we had this kitchen and dining room, the co-working, more than as a co-working, is a commercial area, which is a cooperative of consume of vegetables and organic food, etc. A multi-purpose room, the laundry, a guest room, a health area, and outdoor spaces or semi-outdoor, like a courtyard, bike parking, terraces, storage. As I said, we proposed the municipality to change the regulations, and I think this is something that I think it was a victory, that through this kind of process we can challenge the current regulations and we can provide frameworks for other developments to be developed with this kind of new regulations. We collectively decide the environmental goals, how we can reduce the energy consumption, the water, the materials, as much as possible with our budget, which was already quite also low. And basically the project was in between these two existing buildings, with a south facade, which is the best facade in our context to have the sun captions, so to get the sun energy as much as possible. This internal courtyard, which is a kind of a space for the community to meet, to see, to circulate, and to enhance interaction, but also is functioning as a kind of a collective saving, as a collective energy saving, as also through a greenhouse keeps the sun energy inside, and make all the volume more compact, so reduce the facades with like the external behavior, so which are more exposed to the climate, to the rain, etc., etc. And we can see also in the ground floor this passage, the common areas like the kitchen and this cooperative of consume. And in this scheme, this idea of transition through the public to the community to the individual units. So it's really present. So I would say that these transitions and spaces of interaction and the passive strategies were the main important in the design, making this really dense block in the south facade this courtyard in the middle, which also keep the energy, and finally the ground floor with the common areas and the only 4 units in the north facade, but in the highest spaces. Here is the behavior in summer and in winter, with the greenhouse closed or open with cross ventilation. And this is the different workshops to define the housing typologies. After understanding each of the needs, basically we define a kind of an open infrastructure of rooms, of units that can be, that can be changed through the life span of the cooperative and the units, and can be connected, having several typologies that for this kind of different unit composition. This was also developed in terms of participation with infrastructure, which is kind of naked, or each unit can define like the kitchen and the position of the access to the bathroom, and then during the living they can build like different kind of divisions and internal partitions to adjust their needs. So this was also participation to just define it. And once like everyone has kind of distributed in the building, we can had this kind of image of the different kind of a puzzle, kind of different kind of compositions and typologies in each of the floor plans. So this is the ground floor with this public passage to connect from the neighborhood to the park. This kitchen in the ground floor and this kind of commercial activity place. And here we can just see like how this courtyard with the circulations and the common areas, kind of the lobby, is combined with the units, and how each unit is kind of functioning different because it's kind of a really open spaces with no hierarchy that allow people to really live in these spaces really different. And for example, in this first floor, we have an L, kind of the biggest one, the small and 2 medium sizes, but this is something that is just changing in these different kind of floors. And just to finish about this kind of the design decisions about the environmentally impact, it was important for the cooperative to also be kind of pioneer in terms of materiality. And after studying different kind of scenarios, we decided collectively to build in wood, which was in CLT, so counter-laminated wood, timber, which was the more sustainable material. And also, as it was a kind of expensive, but we allowed to manage with a low budget because we can reduce the layerings, we can reduce like the insulation, etc., etc. So basically, we had the ground floor in concrete, and all the distributions in the houses were already in the structure. So in a way, we have with the structure, the main infrastructure already defined. As we can see here, in 6 weeks, we already built this six floor building, and the main infrastructure was totally linked to the structure. And also during the construction, the people were really were visiting the building to really understand how it's going to be built, which was also important for the future maintenance of it, the different kind of layerings. And we also introduced a bit of self-construction, self-build, in order to reduce the budget, but also to use the waste of the structure to build one of the floors from the ground floor. So, and here is some pictures with the building already finished. And I will start like just a really brief, the last 2 blocks really briefly, which basically it's kind of images from this appropriation. It was a really naked infrastructure because of also the budget was, it's difficult to understand it sometimes in different kind of countries and construction and rates, but basically we built in 850 euros per square meter, which in a passive, highly environmental performance building in wood structure is really, really low. So basically this was because we prioritize the main infrastructure, like the facades, the quality of the windows, etc., the installation, but the rest, it was totally unfinished. So the people took a really important role to define and to appropriate it. So even today, the laundry is still to build as a box, but the users started. So the walls were painted by the people. The units, in a way, was some parts finished by the user in order to also make it more own for them. So this was the main infrastructure. So on these walls of wood, these spaces like just connected to make it different uses for the people, and then like to see how the people is kind of customizing their own flats, making like really different one from another. And also, it was also really beautiful to see how all these infrastructures were really used, especially for the kids, and how the people just kind of feel really comfortable using all the common areas of the building. Each point, each corner was totally kind of used by the people. And here we can see just like how the flowers are starting like to colonize the different spaces. And gatherings and different meetings were using, and how this kind of non-hierarchical spaces, we said, like these really open spaces that allow many different activities to be developed. And the rear facade, like the south facade, also with this sun protection, which also changed a lot the depth of the facade, and this ground floor with the passage and this shop already open, and how also the life it's seen through this polycarbonate. And just to finish, I will have 5 minutes more, maybe. I think it's more or less what we said. It's important to understand how many of the decisions that we took during the process had on mind that we had the people deciding with us, that also we were able to monitorize and also make a lot of pedagogy about the environment, how the behavior of the building. And in that sense, once we moved there, once the people moved there, so we did many kind of workshops to how to use a building, because really a passive building needs a really active inhabitant. So here we had explaining the different mechanisms, and to understand how during summer or winter they had to move the sun protections, they had to activate the ventilation on microventilation of the windows, the heating system, etc. So we gave a lot of control to the users, which for us it was essential to really understand them, how each of them need different kind of temperatures, different kind of ventilations. And also, as we have different sensors, we can, in a way, control the save energy through this process of community and collective management. And all these spaces of interaction were really essential during the lockdown. So this is an image from a kind of informal concert that with distance and kind of collective responsibility was done during the lockdown, where some people just these were from the same unit of conviviality. They were like here in the ground floor, just kind of playing some music, and different kind of neighbors were around the courtyard. Also some kind of conversations, and even any kind of new care protocols of care were developed. And I think it's interesting, and the people felt really kind of thankful to be part of a community in this kind of exceptional moments of individual isolation. So basically, the municipality took this experience and developed kind of 2 actions. One is a cooperative kind of housing committee, a board, to really, in a way, learn from this kind of experiences. And the second one was a public tender for new sites. So nowadays, we have, it was a first competition for 5 new plots, and then just a couple of weeks ago, another public tender, kind of new competition. So this, we had the opportunity to work with a group, and we won the competition of one of the plots, and we, in a way, started this kind of process of revise and redefine the process in a second way with a second group in a second plot. But it was interesting because many of the main strategies about environmental issues, how the surroundings affects the building, were really present, and how we can, in a way, readjust some of the points from the previous infrastructure in that sense, but also having kind of a really open spaces in this second project. And we also took in account what we have learned about the wood structure, about many of the collective devices that we were introducing in LaBorda in this kind of new space. This is kind of a really small block where we wanted, we didn't have, for example, a courtyard. So basically we took outside all the spaces of circulation, all the spaces of interactions, and we put all, like as a terraces, all the, like the circulations and all the collective spaces in the corner of the building to make it more visible. So, and here we can see how all this kind of public space, public kind of parts of the building are really public and visible. Also, this kind of infrastructure that the wood is defining the main spaces of the building. And also the ability that changed through time. Again, which is essential in this kind of organic process and the community. And also how these kind of terraces and spaces of circulation are going to have the best qualities in terms of visual and sun caption, which is the end is kind of make the less view or the less user spaces which can be a kind of a stair or a corridor in the conventional housing market. Here suddenly became the more privileged areas of the cooperative. And just here is kind of how to see how in Barcelona we have nowadays, after LaBorda, many other projects are ongoing. So this idea of as a model, it's really a kind of a new model, but also in Catalonia, we are having more and more. So in a way, we are challenging this culture of the ownership, the individual ownership, but we are now providing as architects tools for municipalities and for new groups to scale up the model, like systematizing the process that we have developed with the first and the second experiences, but also understanding how this can be applied not only in public plots as until the moment, but also which are the new opportunities that we have in the cities to really introduce cooperative housing model as in empty buildings, in dispersed flats, kind of a non-continuous cooperative, in inhabit buildings where people are, in some of the cases, even having bullying from international funds to buy the flat, or even private plots available in the city. So how we can kind of mobilize as many opportunities and resources that we have in order to create a kind of a more sustainable kind of city and neighborhoods. So that was all for my part, maybe kind of a bit longer than I expected, but well, I hope it was clear.
Thank you very much, Cristina. That was a lovely lecture. We've enjoyed it very much, and really happy that you've joined us across the internet for now.
Thank you.
And there's quite a lot of questions here. I mean, I actually, we don't stand the chance of taking even a portion of them. But shall we start somewhere? So you've mentioned toward the end of your talk, you started talking about scalability and replicability of the model. So that seems to be picking up in Spain. And although the cooperatives are not custom in Spain as they are in Northern Europe and so on. So how do you see that in future with a new housing legislation being passed on recently, as you've mentioned? That was the first condition that has set the tone for, and has allowed this system to pick up in Barcelona. Just a little, I would like to tease out a little bit more on the future of the model in your context.
So exactly, so when we started LaBorda, it was a kind of a pioneer project. So it was the first experience that the municipality was kind of enhancing through the public land. But as Lacol, as a kind of a technical team, we realized that it was a kind of several kind of layers. So in a way, we were not able to develop the model only based on public housing, but also through be able to develop public tenders, public competitions, or even the kind of public mechanisms to produce that. We should to develop the model in a kind of a legal framework. So before LaBorda, it was any other experience, at least in Catalonia or in Barcelona, following that model. So in a way, we understood that the knowledge that we and the work and effort made in LaBorda had to be systematized. And as a technical team in Lacol, we co-found a foundation which is called La Dinamo, that basically is a kind of a mechanism to, in a way, share or promote the spread of the model. So through La Dinamo, that which has also economists and lawyers and other kind of disciplines, basically we are developing studies from, for example, last year we developed a study of 10 international experiences to understand the legal frameworks in each territory, in each country, and also, for example, kind of the taxes regulations, and also the relation between the cooperative and the state, or even the municipality. So in a way, for us, it was essential to to build LaBorda was important, because nowadays people see that this is real, this can happen. But to scale it up, it's essential to have a kind of set of different platforms, even to connect different cooperatives, and also a kind of knowledge through the municipalities who don't have the resources of Barcelona as the capital of Catalonia, but also in a way we had also one study to understand, so to share to the different and smaller municipalities which are the main goals of this movement, how they can help, which kind of contracts, which kind of basis on criteria for competitions. So in a way, it's kind of understand the different agents in the chain and give the knowledge to them. So, and exactly, so it was essential to introduce cooperative housing in the housing plan, and now it's essential to introduce cooperative housing in a kind of a higher level, because when the government, the state give funds for housing, you have to be kind of labeled in some of as a mechanism to receive also funds from the state, because otherwise this is really challenging to make it really affordable. So basically, I think, just to answer that, the challenge is to mobilize the demand, so help groups who wants to promote the cooperative, and in the other hand, help the municipalities and generate the legal framework that in a way consolidates the model. Well, I don't know if I've answered the question properly, but yeah.
Okay, so here is another one. It's coming from Sydney. So it's from Andy Fergus. So he says, Cristina, we are currently working on a cooperative prototype in Sydney, and we would love to understand more how you came to 18,500 figure for residents buying. Does this amount earn interest? Can it be refunded when the cooperator leaves? And there are possibilities to loan this amount to reduce the financial hurdle to accessing housing. Were most residents able to come up with this figure?
So this is about the initial down payment, no? You said?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So one of the main critiques that we made to ourselves is that in a way we really want to become an alternative also for low-income families, and it's kind of a form of social housing, which in a way is a kind of a contradiction, because 18,500 euros for a family of low incomes, it's quite high. So because it was the first experience, we had no initial capital, and because we had to define the statutes, and in a way it was open like the path, we had this, for us, quite high initial down payment. So in our case, exactly, so it's this initial capital. If someone leaves the cooperative, this capital is returned. So it's a kind of the participation to the cooperative. If you leave, you receive back this money. You don't receive the monthly quotes. So the monthly fee is basically because you are using the flat, because it includes kind of energy cost, maintenance, etc. So in other models, you receive like the initial down payment, and also the monthly fees. But in a way, for us, has no sense. It was our decision. So, and the idea is like the next inhabitant is going to pay this 18,500 thousand euros, and it's true that this amount could be higher in order to ask for less money to the banks, for example. But in the other hand, this idea of affordability. In LaBorda, there were some people that had problems to pay this amount, and we had like kind of solidarity mechanisms. So people pay a bit more in the beginning, and other people pay a bit less. But if we increase this cost, so this amount, this money, this is going to be really challenging for some of the families. So the idea is in the future to reduce as much as possible the initial down payment in order to make it as kind of universal as possible. So people with really low incomes who really need to have access to affordable housing, make it able. So in a way, and also it's important that in our case, as is a public land, the municipality also is, so the people who is living in LaBorda, it's fulfilling the criteria of social housing, which means that you have a maximum of incomes and you cannot be an owner of any kind of property housing. So if we are developing a cooperative housing in a private plot, and maybe you have profiles of units with different kind of incomes, maybe makes easy that someone can pay much a higher initial down payment, which makes easier to another one to pay less, or to just reduce the money to ask to the banks. But in our case, as the families has a maximum of incomes, that's why it was difficult to increase this amount. So for us, the idea is to reduce as much as possible this amount of money, because the idea is that in the future, maybe the different cooperative can make a collective savings, a collective funds that helps to have this 20% of in the own capital to ask the bank for the rest. So our idea is to, in a way, reduce this amount. But I think there is a kind of different kind of, so it's a kind of a complex issue. And of course, if you reduce that, you mean that you need more money from the bank with interest, but at the same time makes more accessible. So in a way, it's kind of find a balance. It's also important to say that in our case, all the total funding of the investment had 1.7 of interest, which it was quite low, at least in Spain. So maybe with other kind of circumstances or contexts, maybe it's more interesting to reduce the bank loan. So well, this is the point, but yes, this was the...
How does that issue of affordability tap in from investment into a design philosophy? Because we see that there is a choice of certain building materials and approach to construction, and in the construction system, everything is kind of working toward a certain threshold and reaching the affordability. I'm curious to see from the designer's point of view, which you are actually in the first place. How does that transpire into what you do?
Well, I think in terms of this idea of affordability, or just so. In one, I think it was kind of several strategies. In one hand, we wanted to reduce the cost of the construction and the cost of the maintenance, also or the cost of the life. So it was as important you had this passive building as also to reduce the cost of the construction. So every time was this balance. So maybe if we reduce the cost of the insulation, then we will pay more. So as the monthly fee was based because of the return from the cost construction to the bank, but also because of the energy consumption, it was this kind of balance. So I would say like the first idea was to reduce the consumption, so to really make the energy at the building really passive. In the second one, it was this idea of a really kind of the infrastructure with the maximum qualities. But as we decided collectively to invest in the structure, also we assumed that the rest of the materials could be even sometimes less sustainable or really cheaper. So for example, as we see, like we need inertia in the pavement to keep the heat. So we have concrete, which is not that sustainable, but the amount of concrete that we have in the pavement, it's lower than the concrete that we will have if all the structure is in concrete. So constantly it was kind of decisions about the environmental behavior, the construction cost, also the time. So with the wood structure, the construction time was really shorter. So that also allows us to have less cost of as a developer in a way of the construction company, etc., etc. So all decisions was kind of more complex to say this material is less or more expensive. But basically, I would say that is really naked infrastructure to, in a way, finish it through time. Self-construction when where possible, so, or even decide, so the paint was not done in the first phase of the professional construction, so people just painting themselves a house, or the kitchen was not finished. So the things that were really kind of easy were done by the future inhabitants. And in terms of the construction, it was, the structure was the main kind of vector, like the main issue with the highest impact. And the other ones was in a way a kind of balance between the cost, the energy and the time. But yeah, I would say that basically the naked infrastructure, the finishing through time, the self-building were basically things that were present as ideas.
I think you've already answered this, but we have a question from Amanda. When you were talking about using cross-laminated timber, you mentioned that you manage costs by reducing insulation as an example. Could you please elaborate on this? I think that's pretty much very much tied in to what you were just saying now. So.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So with the wood, we reduced the foundations as it was a lighter structure. We reduced the cost time, so the process was much shorter. We reduced the insulations, also the layerings. As you saw in the pictures, we see like the wood in the ceilings. Also, all the like the internal partition because the structure was facade and was walls. So yeah, I think some of that was the point.
Jonathan from Studio Epsilon would like to know more about spatial flexibility and adaptability employed in your design process. So he wonders whether or not flexibility is only within the units, or you were thinking about connecting and expanding units as needs change and the residents move on from one place to another.
Yeah, because maybe this is something that I didn't explain it that much, sorry. So exactly, so when we, for example, when you saw this image from the people inside the Borda structure, it was a kind of a series of walls with a kind of a big door. So the structure is prepared in order to connect all the spaces in the same floor, and then with just kind of plaster walls, we just close to define the different units with these sizes, but in the future can change. So the idea of flexibility, I think, can be defined in three kind of levels. We understood flexibility as really kind of spaces with the same sizes. We don't say this is a bedroom, this is a living room. So basically people can just decide how to live. Then you can just connect different spaces so that the unit can grow or degrow with the connection of rooms because of this kind of flexible wood structure. And the last mechanisms, or two more mechanisms, is like, as the cooperative is the ones who's managing the building, knows the needs of the people. So also you can, in the future, can be like changes. So the people who is living in a small flat can change because they grow the family and can move to another bigger, and in the other way around, for example. And also we were imagining that as the courtyard is kind of it's indoor space because it's already close with this greenhouse, we also were promoting the idea of having a kind of a discontinuous unit where you can just have a room in another part of and all the windows are kind of doors because we wanted to enhance the option to just go to one room from the courtyard. So the idea is that you can have a small unit in one floor and a room in another one. So exactly, so there were several of strategies through time, more or less easy to apply it, because of course, if you want to decrease or increase your room, you have to negotiate it with your neighbor. But through time, I think can happen several kind of circumstances. And basically, there is a kind of a series of mechanisms that you can have. And sorry, we also learned that sometimes some of the mechanisms is not also only related to architecture. For example, to make it easy, this kind of grow and degrow, we were also working with with lawyers. So basically, the infrastructure is defined by the units of 40 square meters are like the minimum dwelling following the regulations in Barcelona. So basically what we define is all are minimum dwellings, and these rooms that you can connect to one flat or to another one are not, they don't have a consideration of housing, are common areas of private use. So basically in the contract of each unit that is also controlled by the municipality says that you as an inhabitant has a minimum unit of 40 square meters, and all these rooms in between units are common areas managed by the cooperative. So the growth and the growth, it's easier in terms of legal aspects because we also took in consideration that. So I think one of the main learnings is this idea like the architecture alone has no sense. So always this idea of economy and legal aspects are are important in our discipline.
Okay, I'm changing the topic slightly. There's a string of questions related to pandemic and changes that this might bring for co-housing. But probably Hela's question is most articulate one. So what she's saying, where have you, and potentially, do you see co-housing support people in times of pandemic and the kind of change this might bring within the future?
Yeah, so at least, so of course, I think each country and each measures through against the pandemic had been different. So in Spain, we had almost 2 entire months of lockdown. Most of the time, even kids cannot go outside. So it wasn't an in a way, it was a kind of really top-down measures which blocked the kind of the collective co-responsibility. So through Barcelona, started to emerge kind of initiative of solidarity and kind of collective support in the neighborhoods for the more vulnerable people, even from migrant people, etc. So in a way, in LaBorda, the first 15 days, it was a kind of more severe kind of lockdown. But once the community realized that it was safe, so inside it was anyone that was kind of suffering the pandemic, and it started to emerge different initiatives. One of the I think more crucial was that the mothers and fathers organized themselves in order to have the care of the children collectively, and a kind of informal school, which in a way was not. It's true that it was kind of illegal because it was a kind of a relation in between the families, but I think it's understanding that the isolation that the state was proposing, it was to a household, but as a cooperative, they understood as a household as kind of the whole building, and the collective measures to save in terms of cleaning, protocols of care, etc., was totally collective done. So in that sense, the more vulnerable people were more isolated in their homes, and the young people were just buying things, anything that they need. Also, the common areas were spaces for just walk and move the body when it's really needed for some people. As I said, like there was this kind of a school, and also the guest room was prepared for people who need to work. For example, like a mother who wanted to work some hours just uses some of the common areas for working from home, more kind of in a silent or separate spaces. Also, the guest room was prepared in case anyone can suffer from the pandemic, to just isolate it there and to not share the pandemic. So in a way, I think it was also some spaces to share emotionally how people was suffering or not from the isolation, or what kind of needs they had. So of course, I think that as a cooperative, it was a kind of a response. Also, it was a young community because it was only 1.5 years since people were living there. So of course, things could be done differently, better or worse. But also the municipality has shared some messages in the media saying that how collective housing and cooperative housing could be a response because of all these experiences. So yes, definitely, I think. And even with all these windows in the courtyard, even being separated and safe, it was a capacity to say hello, to see each other, and all this, it was important.
Great. Look, I really apologize for changing the topic. So when I'm scrolling through the list of questions, there are so many of them and they are diverse. So changing the topic again, the question is coming from Piyush. He says, what role does communitarian versus libertarian ideology plays in acceptability of cooperative model? You mentioned that there was a tradition of co-op in Barcelona and that helped the project. Would this work in societies which are based on individual property rights and have strong preference for individual home ownership, like in Australia?
Well, I think that in a sense that, of course, in Sants, in the neighborhood, it was this kind of tradition of cooperativism, and some of the people in LaBorda, it's member of Cooperative of Work or that. So it's true that I think that it's a really political project, and the people has a kind of political kind of it's really conscious about their own acts. But I think that even the pandemic and other circumstances has made people really think about. So in a way, one of the main challenges that we are facing is this idea of the culture of the private ownership, and it's also really common in Spain. So you have seen your family, your grandparents had built their own houses, and the property and the heritage is really, really present. So it's not that different from from Australia or the context. It's true that I think the young generations have seen the suffer from also the crisis, the mortgage, the evictions, also the dynamics of mobility. So young generations are just traveling more or just working out abroad. So I think that there is a series of social changes that are in a way promoting that these models could have a better understanding, and even kind of in terms of gender, care, it's this idea of more individual households. So I think it's a kind of combination of factors which made possible the growth of the model, despite it's a collective ownership and you are not going to be owners. So, and well, I think it's something that has to be understood or presented with this complexity. So of course you are not going to be owner, but you have a stability and many other benefits from this kind of structures to provide housing. And it's true that also our model was totally based in these parameters of collective, etc. But there is also kind of other mechanisms and variations in other countries, which maybe makes more interesting. So in the sense that is the initial down payment is higher, and or if the monthly fees are returned, it's a kind of understanding as a saving also as a cooperative. So in a way, the main thing is to avoid the speculation. But of course, each country will define their own model. It's not a recipe that could be applied everywhere in the same way, and has to take in consideration legal frameworks, cultural frameworks, etc., etc. So, and for example, in Denmark, it's the cooperative is the owner, but there is no this conviviality model, which is something that we are really pushing as a part of the model. So in each part, these ideas are going to be different. So definitely, I think it's just start working and start like seeing that this is possible, and more and more people are going to be interested.
We have to close down slowly, but maybe one last question is about architectural education. See, what you do, you're telling us it took you 6 years to complete the projects from Housing Cooperative was formed to when people moved in. It took like 6 years or more. So in a sense, so it really changes what architects do. We spoke, you spoke a lot about it, and we mentioned it through discussion as well. But then again, how do you think that will reflect on architectural education in a sense? How do you think we can prepare architects to be more engaged with the societies and economy and environment as well?
Yeah, but I would say firstly that I think it's even more because 6 years before the conviviality, but after the conviviality, we did like several manuals and even monitoring, etc. So in a way, it's continuing even after to understood and the behavior of the building and how we can just help, and even with the second phases of construction, etc. So it's quite long, but indeed, basically, I think it's essential to introduce these different disciplines also in the school, just to learn from the beginning the interaction from architecture with these different disciplines, which in Barcelona was not like that. So I think it's really important that schools where you can even have sociology or any other kind of subjects and topics being studied in the school. Also, even different tools of like participation methods, etc., etc. So, of course, each of the students and architects will develop their own path outside, because in a way we'll learn by ourselves. So in the moment that we study in Barcelona, any of these topics was present in the school. We were quite critical, and also one of the things is also as students to really manifest the desires, and we choose Cambodia as academic exercise, and because it was also as a response to a lack of reality in the school. So I think this idea of be critical, it's essential. Each project will allow kind of specific knowledge, and even in the school, this development of the critical approximation is essential. So I would say that if the school is not providing this expertise or this knowledge, the professional practice has to be understood as a learning process. So I invite all the people just to, in a way, just move and work collectively with other practice disciplines abroad.
Thank you very much, Cristina. A lot of the messages that we're getting are either thank you or ending with thank you. So thanks very much from everyone on our side, and I think we really have to stop somewhere, and hope to see you soon. So I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everyone that series will continue MSD at home. A number of lectures are coming, an interesting one on Friday morning already by Julia Watson. And also there is a series of recorded lectures available from our website and YouTube channel. Thank you very much, everyone. We are closing down the event here. Thank you. Cristina, thanks again.
Thanks, bye.